day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big issues that we need to be looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and nobody will be cancelled for saying exactly what they think. Keeping me company today is journalist and writer James Bloodworth, and here's what we're discussing on the show. Is he holed up in a nuclear bunker, and does he know how badly his invasion is going? GCHQ's spy chief thinks Putin is being lied to by advisors. Meanwhile, Liz Truss is on her way to India to tell Modi to stop buying Russian fuel. But also en route is her Kremlin counterpart. We have the latest on Ukraine. Now, almost every front page today reveals horrifying failures in maternity services in the NHS. How on earth is childbirth dangerous in Britain in 2022? And the ever-controversial trans debate finds its latest arena in the velodrome, as cycling's international governing body intervenes to stop a newly transitioning competitor entering a women's race. So why won't our politicians speak up? That's what we're talking about for the next hour, but what do you need to get off your chest? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. First, though, it's time for the GB News headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:01. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. The UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russians, with broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. It comes after Ukraine's president called for tougher action against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky received standing ovations as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian parliaments. He asked for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership. He also told them Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world.
Whatever is happening in our region because of the Russian aggression, what is destroying the lives of people, has become a real threat to your country and to your people as well, because this is the nature of the evil. It can instantly cross any distance. Russian representatives, official propagandists, they are openly discussing the possibility of using nuclear weapons against those who don't want to subdue.
Speaking in Brussels, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says there's no evidence that Russia is scaling back.
According to our intelligence, Russian units are not withdrawing, but repositioning. Russia is trying to regroup, resupply, and reinforce its offensive in the Donbas region. So we can expect additional offensive actions bringing even more suffering.
In a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisors are scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people and that Putin's overestimated the abilities of his military to secure a rapid victory.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
In other news, fracking firm Quadrilla has been told it no longer needs to plug its wells in Lancashire. The North Sea Transition Authority says the deadline's been extended until the end of June of next year. The move comes ahead of the publication of the government's delayed energy strategy, with Boris Johnson under pressure to end a suspension on fracking. Quadrilla says shale gas has the potential to be a significant contributor to the UK's energy supplies. Labour has launched its local election campaign in Bury, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600. The party's warning that households can expect to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living squeeze. The Labour leader says the public deserves better than what he calls a pathetic response from the government. Responding to a question about Partygate, Sir Keir said the Prime Minister's wife should be named if she's fined, but ultimately the buck stops with Boris Johnson.
If Carrie Johnson gets a fixed penalty notice, of course it should be made public. My focus is on the Prime Minister because he's the one who sets the culture. He's the one who oversaw this criminality in his home and his office. He's the one that came to Parliament and said that all rules were complied with, which is clearly not the case.
Firefighters are tackling a large blaze at a business in Stretton in Derbyshire. They say the fire covers an area of 30 metres. Staffordshire Police have closed nearby roads and drivers are being advised to avoid the area. No injuries have been reported. And Royal Mail is phasing out its traditional first and second class stamps, replacing them with new barcoded ones. It's part of a modernisation drive boasting added security features. Customers will also be able to watch and share videos by scanning the barcodes in the Royal Mail app. Normal stamps will be valid until February next year. After that, you'll be able to swap them for the new versions. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Alex with We Need to Talk About.
Putin's grip on reality has long been questioned. From sealing himself off from human contact during COVID, potentially causing derangement, to refusing to ever read Western press, preferring convoluted briefings from terrified sycophants, to the suggestion he's now holed up in a Siberian nuclear bunker, quite whether his ramblings are calculated or the caterwauls of a lunatic can be hard to call. What's clear to observers, however, is that his invasion of Ukraine hasn't gone to plan, leading to the sacking of 8 generals and a purge of intelligence personnel. The problem with dictators is that few are brave enough to tell them the truth. Well, Britain's spy boss, Sir Jeremy Fleming, head of GCHQ, told a conference in Australia that, perhaps as a result, Putin's invasion is now in disarray. But the problem, with nobody plucking up the courage to spill the tea, is that equally nobody has his ear to urge restraint. Something Liz Truss will be trying to do to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he goes on a spending spree for cut-price Russian fuel. But there's a problem, as none other than Sergei Lavrov, her Kremlin equivalent, has also flown to Delhi to court support. Quite where loyalties lie in this tug of war is yet to be seen, but could be hugely significant for how long conflict rages in Europe. Well, I'm delighted to be joined by former senior military intelligence officer and NATO planner, Philip Ingram. Philip, do you think Putin has realigned his objectives in line with his capabilities, or are we seeing a sort of moving around of the chess pieces, but his intentions probably remain the same?
Well, his intentions have to change. He set the objective, and he said this publicly, and as did his foreign minister Lavrov, to topple the Ukrainian government, and that required him to do a quick operation into Kiev. He tried that with air mobile forces in the first few days of his invasion, and that failed. The Ukrainians beat them back. They had a small toehold in an airport to the northwest of Kiev, and the Ukrainian forces pushed them out of that and then shot down a couple of transport aircraft full of paratroopers that were due to come and reinforce it. So he's trying to wrestle the initiative back again. The losses are really hurting him, and that's why he's saying he's going to concentrate on the Donbass. Actually, before it all happened, that's what everyone was thinking he was only going to do. Whilst he consolidates what he's tried to achieve in the southern coastline area, joining up Crimea through the Donbass region and into Russia, but he's been fixed in Mariupol, and he's trying to get some degree of combat power back again, which is very difficult. So he's buying time with all the statements he's making as he tries to work out what his next moves are going to be and whether actually he's playing chess whilst everyone else is playing a different game.
Yeah, I mean, the West is also trying to figure out what Putin might be trying to figure out and what his next moves will be. There were some reports, perhaps, that he's now in a nuclear bunker in Siberia with few able to reach him and perhaps fewer still willing to stand up to him. How worried should we be that, Putin might not be accessible even to those on his own side?
Well, his closest advisors will stay around him, and you summed it up very well, in your introduction. They're very scared to say anything to him. We've seen advisors that have pointed out things going wrong in the government beforehand, being sent off to take up window cleaning jobs, and they suddenly find that the 9th floor window they're starting to clean has just been opened and they fall out of it. Or if it's true opposition, they find that they've got Novichok in their underpants. So they know what's going to happen if they criticise. So they're only going to feed him what he wants to hear. They will have an understanding of the reality of what's going on the ground, but they will have separated that in the way dictators do. Hitler, right up to the last moments in the bunker, was convinced that the German forces were eventually going to find some way of beating back the allies that are coming through. Putin is in the same game. However, Putin is very early on in the same game and can continue with what he's doing inside Ukraine by surrounding centres of population and pounding the civilian people and murdering them. He can do that for a long, long time yet.
I mean, is that therefore the fact that now this sort of more chaotic military invasion that Putin is overseeing, could it be a positive omen that things are beginning to fall apart for him? Or is it in fact a sort of perilous harbinger that it could all go very wrong very quickly and escalate in a terrifying manner?
Well, in one way, it's very positive because it's showing that he's failing. His military operation has failed so far and will continue to fail. However, that failure is being measured in thousands and thousands of civilians being killed and millions of people being displaced, and that can go on for a long time. However, at some stage, if he doesn't find a way of wrestling his initiative back, and we can never let him do that, he's got to a point where he has to make a decision as to whether he loses face completely and withdraws. He's not going to do that. Or he turns around and does something very nasty indeed. We don't want him to go down that path. And we have to hope that somewhere in between that, there's a little palace coup in either Moscow or in his nuclear bunker or somewhere else, and he just disappears.
Yeah, that would be good indeed, wouldn't it? Philip Ingram, thank you ever so much. Former senior military intelligence officer and NATO planner. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Dr. Alan Mendoza. Alan, let's switch our attentions to Britain's approach now. You've got the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss on her way to India to try and convince Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, to stop buying cut-price Russian fuel and, in essence, feeding Putin's regime and his military operations. But at the same time, you've got Sergei Lavrov going there, one assumes, to give quite the opposite line. How do you see that tug of war going?
Well, I think, unfortunately, given India's positioning already, it's likely the Russians will win this. I mean, India and Russia have had a long-standing relationship that's very, independent of what obviously is happening right now in Ukraine. India buys 49%, I think it is, of its military kit from Russia. It has benefited from Russian support against Pakistan in the past. I mean, essentially, I think it's unlikely that the Foreign Secretary will achieve her objective, and highly likely that Mr. Lavrov will achieve his.
Do you think it'd be fair to say that for too long now, the West and countries like the UK have frozen Modi out because they might not have liked some of his domestic politics, when actually, strategically, India should be a vital partner to the West?
Well, India is a vital partner to the West, and I don't think Modi's been frozen out as such. I think various governments here have made significant entreaties to the Indian Prime Minister, and actually, it's not simply in the case of trade. In diplomatic terms as well, we've made our efforts to bring India into all sorts of gatherings in that sense. But the reality is, for India, strategically, it will always see its first priority as the Pakistan-India conflict, and as such, it will make decisions on its own national security based on what it feels is best for that before it looks elsewhere for other allies in that regard.
I mean, let's also talk about China here, of course. So Jeremy Fleming took opportunity at the conference in Australia to also, on the record, warn China about their relationship with Russia and how that could detrimentally affect their relationship with the West. How do you think China are going to play this out? Are they looking at the long game and thinking perhaps actually, because economically they have a lot of eggs in the Western basket, that they don't want to upset us? Or do you think that they too will be happy playing both sides?
Well, I think they'd love to play both sides. That's the way China's operated for some time. And I think, of course, the calculation in Beijing is likely to be, how serious are the West? I suspect what we'll see is a few efforts by China to test the West and to see what our reaction will be. I suppose in a way much like Putin tested the West beforehand and felt the West wasn't going to respond, or he was proven wrong there. And I suppose what we have to do, therefore, is when China does make its attempts to test what we have told it to avoid doing, we have to hit back hard and so remind China that there will be consequences for such actions. I think if we do that, there's a good chance that China will essentially stay out of it and will have to sort of minimize its meddling in the conflict on Russia's side. If we don't do that, China will no doubt want to have its cake and eat it, and will indeed attempt to, maximize as much potential from the Russia relationship as it can, without also severing ties with the West. So much of this, again, will depend on how we actually respond to whatever China decides to do.
And from the very beginning, having war back in Europe again, there's been a huge fear that this could escalate and become incendiary across the whole continent, if not the whole world. You're excellent at reading the geopolitical tea leaves. Is that fear still there, do you think?
I think it's definitely lessened because, of course, what was going to drive that was essentially a massive Russian push to the borders of Ukraine. Now, it's quite clear Vladimir Putin will not be able to conquer the country anytime soon, if at all. And as such, you don't have the prospect of Russian troops on the borders of Europe. And secondly, of course, because Western nations have refused to get involved militarily, you don't have any prospects of that occurring again. There is still a chance that he may, if he feels the war is going particularly badly, he will use either chemical weapons or tactical nuclear weapons on the ground in Ukraine. If that does happen, then of course we've been told by Washington, and we've said there will be a response, and we don't know what that response is. Could that response lead to a counter response? Who knows? Clearly, though, if Russia crosses a line in the use of chemical weapons or tactical nuclear weapons, there will need to be a response. So once again, this is sort of in Putin's domain now as to where we might go. But certainly the fear of a land war, or the sense that he was going to come over beyond his current kind of targets is less likely, simply because the Russian army can't manage it.
Dr. Mendoza, thank you ever so much. It's always a pleasure speaking to you and listening to your erudite insights. But joining me in the studio today is journalist and writer James Bloodworth. Now, perhaps we should all be breathing a sigh of relief in the West to see that Putin's invasion seems to be grinding to a halt and going wrong, because in many respects, the invasion of Ukraine seems to have caught us wanting when it comes to our solidarity. What's your analysis of where we are now, with Liz Truss going over to India, Sir Jeremy Fleming warning China? Do you think things are moving back in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, these things, this diplomacy, it shows kind of that's the only response the only thing the West can do at the moment is sanctions and a diplomatic response to freeze Russia out of the global economy primarily. Because as Alan was talking about just then, we cannot risk a military confrontation directly between the United States and Russia, because then that could very quickly escalate to global nuclear war, which is something that nobody wants. I think the Russian predicament in Ukraine, I think it's evidence of we've heard about Russian generals not feeling like they can tell the truth to Putin. It shows almost the strengths and weaknesses of a dictatorship. So Putin's lost loads of, thousands of troops. If this was in a Western democracy, you'd see mass protests. Those people cannot protest in Russia, so Putin stays in power, can continue to pursue this disastrous policy. But at the same time, we see that he's not getting accurate information because people are afraid to tell him the truth, which that then damages his war effort.
And one thing perhaps as well that the last few months has really highlighted is that the way that countries like the UK treat other countries publicly and the way they treat them privately doesn't always marry up. And we might say things about the Saudis and their regime, but then buy energy underneath the table. Same with Russia, perhaps same with China as well, allowing them into big infrastructure projects and perhaps not showing as much discernment when it comes to how much we can trust these countries. Is it time that we started playing a more straightforward game?
I think there's two things at play there. So I think on the one hand, diplomacy always has to take a different stance than, say, morality. So I think we can have a principled position on Ukraine, but you still have to try and talk with the Russians, for example, and try and have a proper, frank discussion. I mean, we can't just essentially be insulting and freezing people out. We have to deal with these countries. Where I think we should take a firmer line is more due diligence on, say, investments in this country. So before we say let China take over a certain percentage of our nuclear plants, say Hinkley C in Somerset is being built 25%, I think, by the Chinese state. We've also had Russian investment in telecommunications, attempts to invest in telecommunications. There should be more due diligence on those things so we don't potentially put our own national security at risk.
James, thank you ever so much. Well, the inconvenience, of course, of a democracy is public opinion matters a lot, and I really want to know your views. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews. You are, of course, with GB News on TV and radio. Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast. Is it snowing where you are?
Hello. Winter has most definitely returned. A cold feel out there today. Plenty of sunshine around, but some wintry showers will also continue. High pressure is moving in, bringing, as I say, plenty of sunshine. This weather front brought some wet weather overnight and a covering of snow in places. But around the high, the winds are coming down from the north, hence the cold feel, but also feeding in the moisture from the North Sea, bringing in showers down the eastern side, which will continue to have that wintry mix. Hail, sleet and some snow on the hills. A really strong, bitter wind across East Anglia and the southeast. And a few more flurries likely over the high ground across parts of Kent in particular. It does feel cold despite the sunshine further west. Temperatures only in single figures. Add on that wind and it feels much closer to freezing. As the showers keep coming in from the North Sea through the evening and overnight, it could well turn icy as temperatures tumble across northern and eastern Scotland, northeast England and southeast England too, with a continued threat of further snow over parts of Kent in particular, mostly over the hills. But as I said, it could be slippery almost anywhere we see the showers coming in. Those showers will continue to be a mixture of sleet, snow and hail. A widespread frost, certainly in the west where we'll have largely clear skies. A dry, fine start to Friday for many. Plenty of sunshine, which will melt away any frost, but still one or two showers for Pembrokeshire and Cornwall, and certainly still more to come across parts of eastern England. And again, still that wintry mix, hail showers, some sleet and snow. And then we'll see some wet weather coming south across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, again with snow on the hills and mountains across western Scotland. Again, a cold feel on Friday with temperatures still in single figures and well below average for most. Temperatures falling away on Friday night, so again it could turn quite slippery out there, particularly where we've got this wet weather working southwards with some snow likely mixed into that over the hills across the southwest on Saturday morning. High pressure moving in there, so a lot of dry but cold weather this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Almost every single newspaper front page today lays bare a crisis in maternity services that few would expect in 21st century Britain. Childbirth is not safe in England, declares one stark headline. I'm sorry, what is going on? How can it be that in the world's fifth largest economy, able to send foreign aid to some of the poorest nations on earth to help prevent such tragic and preventable outcomes, women are dying because of some hippie fixation on natural birth? As a woman, you have to ask yourself whether men would ever be denied life-saving surgeries off the back of some trendy idealism for nature's way. One day after public opinion of the NHS is revealed to be at an all-time low, it would seem there's a major problem in our care system to the extent that women and babies are needlessly dying. Joining me now on the show is Chief Executive of the Fertility Foundation, Tone Jarvis-Mack. Tone, what's your interpretation of this news about the maternity scandal? What on earth has gone wrong?
It's shocking that this is going on right now where we are in life. I think it's actually just madness. I've just seen the news stories and I can't even comprehend why this is happening in this day and age.
Do you think this is down to lack of staff, underfunding? Is it down to sort of arrogance of the way that doctors are handling things like women's health services and saying to them, oh, no, you can't have a caesarean section, going along that sort of well-spoken line, too posh to push? That there must be reasons that this is happening, and it's very alarming.
There is. I mean, we deal with couples right from the very beginning of their journey, trying to get pregnant, and we follow them right through to the very end. We actually have a couple, some friends of ours, that have actually been caught up in this, not in this particular one, but have gone through the same situation where they were in hospital, they were in active labour, their little boy wasn't ready, so they were moved out of labour back onto the maternity ward, but they weren't being actively monitored, or the baby wasn't being actively monitored. And when they came down 24 hours later, expecting to give birth to their little boy, found out that unfortunately he didn't make it. And that's just a failing where if you're in active labour, you should be monitored all the way through it. So maybe there isn't enough staff, but it's quite criminal, really, to think that people go in expecting they're going to have a baby, asking maybe if they can have a cesarean if there is a problem, and being told no, you will just have to just suffer through it. And this is where we are now. We're seeing this devastating news for these people.
I mean, some of the anecdotes we're hearing are just heart-wrenching and impossible to understand how this could be in a newspaper in this day and age. What do you think now needs to happen to really make things, you know, give it a massive overhaul, give maternity services a massive overhaul and make women feel safe to give birth in this country again?
I mean, the government give billions and billions to the NHS every year, and is money not being directed in the right way? But I think more than anything, I don't believe that patients are being listened to by their doctors or by nurses, and that really does come right from the top down. That, you know, it's seen that, you know, a patient, you know, a mother to be doesn't really know everything, and a doctor knows better than they do. But ultimately, if you've got if you've got a baby and you can feel them inside, you must know that there's something wrong or there's something happening, and someone should be listening to the mother, you know, or even if they're, you know, if they're lucky quite now due to COVID, if they're allowed to have their partners in, listening to their concerns and actually taking some steps to alleviate them, not just saying, well, you know, it's all fine, or, you know, just letting them just suffer through it and dealing with the consequences on the other end.
Tone, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme today and talking about this really, frankly, upsetting subject. That's Tone Jarvis-Mack, who's the Chief Executive of the Fertility Foundation. Now, James, what do you think about this? Because one thing that strikes me is just a couple of days ago, I read a story about NHS trusts, some, not all, but some NHS trusts saying that they would ask a man if he was pregnant before going into an operating theatre. And I mentioned earlier on in that interview, there's been that mantra going around for some time, the whole too posh to push idea. These things to me seem connected. Do you think there's almost a dangerous level of completely unnecessary moralising now gripping our health services?
I think there can be sometimes. I mean, with the trans debate, for example, I think personally my view is, you know, we should try and make society more accommodating for trans people, but then at the same time recognise that humans are a dimorphic species. There are male and female sexes, and in a medical environment, in a hospital, in a medical setting, we need to be. We can't have ideology coming into it. We need to be clear that this is about biology and human beings and human nature. I think the other issue with the NHS is it tends to be a one-size-fits-all institution, which is great for many things. But, for example, as many people found out during lockdowns, it's not very good for mental health, doesn't deal with mental health very well. This idea that this bureaucratic arrogance, which was telling women that they must give birth a certain way, I think that's completely wrong, and that needs to be kind of rooted out.
I mean, people will always be screaming, especially those who work inside the health services. And of course, we have to say hardworking doctors and nurses if we're ever to critically assess the NHS. People will be screaming, it doesn't get enough money, it doesn't have enough resources, we don't have enough medical professionals. Is money at the root of all this, do you think?
It's not the root of all of it, but it is a significant part of it. So the report talks about staff shortages. So there simply aren't enough. A small number of staff having to cover too many people, and they can't manage it. And so we see this leads to mistakes. And anyone who's used the NHS recently will probably have noticed something similar. So staffing and also money, there has been real terms cut in funding in the last, 12 years now. So that is an issue, but it's not everything. It's things like protecting whistleblowers, making sure staff feel confident to speak out if they don't think something is right, and also empowering patients so that when their complaints are listened to. So there isn't this bureaucratic arrogance which kind of says we know best and just dismisses people's complaints.
James, thank you so much. Well, what do you think about this? Have you got any personal anecdotes you'd be willing to share? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or of course you can tweet us at gbnews. You are with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, a trans cyclist has been blocked from competing in a female race. But should they have been able to enter it in the first place? Now it's time for a check on the news headlines.
It's 2:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russians, with broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. It comes after Ukraine's president called for tougher action against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky received standing ovations as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian parliaments. He asked for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership. He also told them Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world. In a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisers are scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people. A deadline to cap the UK's only shale gas wells has been extended, with regulators telling fracking firm Quadrilla it now has until the end of June next year. The decision comes ahead of the government's delayed energy strategy. The companies welcomed the move, saying it would have been absurd to pour concrete down the wells during an energy crisis. Meanwhile, Labour has launched its local election campaign in Bury, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600. The party warns households can expect to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living squeeze. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. We need to talk about with Alex. We'll be back in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Well, if you want to assess perhaps how dangerously ridiculous the debate over trans versus women's rights has become, perhaps remind yourself that Putin recently compared himself to J.K. Rowling for being cancelled by the West. Today, there's been a rare ray of light in this absurd battle, as the international cycling body has ruled that a recently fully male competitor cannot enter a major women's race that others rightly threatened to boycott. What on earth is wrong with this country when a litany of senior politicians are pathetically unable or perversely unwilling to stand up for half the population being systemically demonised by a niche yet alarmingly zealous trans agenda hell-bent on giving men access to women-only things? Scientific reasoning on sex should be as simple as shutting down a flat earther. Yet in today's right-on culture, abolishing centuries of vital protections for women appears to be totally fine. Well, I'm thrilled to be joined by former Team GB Olympic swimmer Sharon Davis. Sharon, you are infamous, really, for raising your head above the parapet on this issue. You must welcome the international cycling governing body's intervention, telling British cycling, no, this is, bang out of order.
Well, at the moment, the reason they've done that is for a technical reason to do with dates and times, and the fact that at the moment Emily Bridge is registered on the British Cycling website as male. So it's not really stopping the whole process, it's more a technicality. But the good news is that the international body have said that they realise that the rules are not up to scrutiny, that they're not up to the science that's required, and that they're asking for a conglomerate of sporting bodies to come together to come up with better rules. Now, the very good news is the Swimming Association, which is FINA, have actually done that, and they will be issuing some rules, I think, in about June, just pre our World Championships. But, we should never really have got to this point. The IOC changed the rules in 2015. Before that, basically, you had to have surgery, and that affected very, very few people, whereas now it's a matter of just self-identifying and 1 year's reduced testosterone. And that has very little impact on the male puberty advantage, which can be anything between 10 and 30%.
When it comes to other matters such as women's toilets, changing rooms, so on and so forth, perhaps some people out there might say, well, that's far more nuanced and, we need to have a reasonable debate around it. But you'd think when it comes to sport, which is all about physicality and physiology and the biology of the human body, that it really should be cut and dry. Do you think that, we actually just need to go back to men's categories, women's categories, and then saying to trans athletes, let's establish a trans category?
Yeah, or we could go, it needs to go back to the biological categories, like you're saying. So biological female, biological male. Having said that, however, if you happen to be a trans man, which is a biological female on testosterone, she would not be allowed to compete in the female category because that would be illegal doping. Would you believe it? So therefore, if we create an open category, which becomes inclusive and welcoming, then everyone is involved in sport. And there is nobody in sport that doesn't want that. It's ridiculous to say that anyone wants anyone banned. That is not the case. Emily has been competing for the last year in the male category. In fact, only a couple of weeks ago was part of a team that won a medal at the university championships. And she was welcomed, and she's still identified as Emily. And at the American University Championships just a couple of weeks ago, we had a transgender man, a biological female who wasn't on testosterone, who competed in the women's event, and everybody was happy with that as well. So, there is absolutely no reason that people can't identify however they like and be welcomed. They just need to actually compete in the biological category that represents, the advantage or the disadvantage that they have. And it's huge. And at the moment, this will not impact men. Men will not lose their medals, their places, their scholarships. It will be women, biological females, that will lose those opportunities, both to obviously fulfill their dreams, but also the commercial possibilities that will come from the profile that they would get.
Are you surprised at the backlash that is levied against women, or largely women, who champion women's-only sports, women's-only safe spaces? Are you staggered at the backlash against people like you who, frankly, need to be considered brave now for coming out and defending what for centuries has been the blindingly obvious?
I think we're getting to a turning point now. When I started talking about this 3 years ago, because it only really started to impact pre-Tokyo Olympic Games with Laurel Hubbard, people were sceptical as to how much difference it would really make. But now they can actually see people like Leah Thomas, who went from 500th in America to #1 and beating 3 Olympic silver medalists, and someone, like Emily, that was dropped from the men's squad in the under 23s and then transitioned to be able to compete against our own wonderful Laura Trott, Laura Kenny, as she is nowadays. I think people are really beginning to understand what we've been talking about, and a lot more people are breaking cover and coming out now. And the Swimming Coaches Association across the world, that has something like 22,000 members, put to FINA that they were very, very keen that FINA protected female sport. So I think it's turning at long last, which is really, really good, because we've only ever wanted respectful debate that's based on science. Nobody wants to stop anyone from living their authentic life.
Sharon, it's been wonderful to have you on the show, and that sort of change in opinion is in no small part down to people like you. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing you on this subject. Sharon Davis, of course. Joining me now on the show is diversity and inclusion facilitator Katie John Went. Katie, we meet again. It always seems, new week, new way of framing the trans debate.
Same old story.
Same old, right? What do you think about this? I mean, listening to what Sharon has said, surely it does come down to science, but why is there always such furore every time that women are saying, well, come on, it's blindingly obvious that someone born male is going to have an advantage in sport?
Well, bizarrely enough, today is actually the International Transgender Day of Visibility, but it's one of those days where I feel like I wish I was invisible, because it seems as though that we're visible every day and there is a new reason for us to be in the news. But I think, and Sharon actually used the word, there is a turning point now, and I actually think to a degree there probably should have been a turning point earlier when it had been about refugees and women in prison, and for it to be about sport. I don't know why that was the turning point that has really made people turn on a sixpence on some of this. And in fact, Martina Navratilova and Sharon have been, you used the phrase, that some women being systematically demonized by a niche group. I wouldn't go so far to say that at all. But Sharon and Martina have had a hard time for stating facts, sports facts, biological facts. And facts are indeed and do remain true. And we've already, mentioned the likes of Leah and Laurel Hubbard as well. And I do think this is down to the sports bodies to tighten up, because the athletes themselves are just following the rules. And everyone within the rules of whether it's swimming or motor racing or anything else, people, seek to maximize the ability of the rules to benefit their own performance, sleeker swimsuits, faster cars, or whatever it might be. But indeed, there are some sports, though, like motor racing, like horse racing and others, where actually gender doesn't necessarily play a part. So that, for example, in motor racing and sport and jockeying, they level up the weight of the body on the horse to create this equality. And there are some sports where gender matters less. But where gender does matter, then I think you have to accept facts and you have to accept biology. And just lowering testosterone is not enough to make a difference. And I think you can't be blind to the biology of development. I can say this as a person who habitually was last in every sports category I ever did, partly because I didn't have a male puberty until I was 18, 19, because I had a puberty disorder. So therefore my body didn't develop too much taller than my 5'6" frame, and I don't have great strong body bulk and muscles, and I would be beaten by most women in sport. But most of the people who are elite sports and athletes are already at the top of their game, and then when they transition, I do think they need a degree of empathy to realize what, in pursuing their own excellence and goal, they are taking other places. And I know that's going to get me shot down in flames by people on my side of the fence, so to speak, the trans community. But I do think it has gone too far and sport needs to call time on it. I don't know that there is a perfect solution. And as Sharon was just saying, you can't just say it's biology, because then you end up with a problem with trans men and testosterone or something like that. There has to be some degree of nuance.
Trying to pivot this argument back to biology doesn't win you many fans. Katie John Went, is fantastic talking to you on Trans Visibility Day. I didn't know that, and we don't want you to be invisible because we love
the last day of Women's History Month every year.
Thank you so much, Katie John. Now, James, let's pivot back to politics on this, because it's been a busy week, hasn't it, of politicians being grilled on, can a woman have a penis? Why on earth is this debate now so absurd? What is about this overcorrection that now women feel under threat and silenced?
Yeah, I think empathy is important, as was mentioned there. We should have empathy for trans people. I do feel like they're a persecuted group in our society. But I think our society is one of the better places to live in the world as a trans person. I think the problem with gender ideology is this idea that biology doesn't matter anymore. So there's this mantra that, trans women are women. Well, biology in a medical setting or in a sports setting, no, trans women are trans women, and that should be fine. We seem to have moved to a place where gender stereotypes have become more pronounced. So if you look at, say, music from the 60s or 70s, you had people like David Bowie, androgyny was quite fashionable, whereas now it's someone who's a trans person has to conform to certain stereotypes, has to be a man or a woman. They can't be a trans man or a trans woman. I think that's an interesting part of this. And I think that causes problems when it comes to settings where biology does really matter, sport, hospitals, medical settings.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something you said at the very beginning there about trans people being persecuted. And this is often what we keep hearing, that trans people have a really bad time out there. It strikes me that perhaps things might have been easier when they were allowed to just get on with life. There wasn't this raging debate. Do you not worry that perhaps these so-called culture wars are going to make life difficult for people who just want to be allowed to crack on and exist in the way they want to?
Yeah, I mean, it might make it more difficult. I think a lot of the problems around that trans people face, a lot of it's to do with men, so men feeling insecure about what's masculine, what's feminine. I think that's a big issue. I think that's something that's been long-standing. But yeah, this kind of debate where you have these kind of absurd things happening, I think that can lead some people to become more resentful of trans people, unfortunately.
James, thank you ever so much. Well, of course, I want to know your views. I'm sure you've got many of them. So email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us on this or any of the other topics we've been covering today at GBNews on Twitter. Well, you've been sending your emails in throughout the show about the maternity scandal. And Irene says, I think the NHS badly needs reforming. I think a lot of the problems today is in the way midwives are trained. Nursing and midwifery are hands-on professions, and practice is how we learn. Karen says, this report is so upsetting. There are so many hard-working midwives devoted to the care of all women while pregnant and giving birth. Of course, they should be better resourced and better paid, but this isn't the reason for the failures. Stuart says, the maternity scandal is a reflection of the systemic failings of the NHS. I call for a systematic and public review of the NHS. It is not a free service. Quite right, we do pay for it. Caroline says, I've worked in hospitals and GP surgeries, and I know the pressures that doctors, nurses and medical secretaries face every day. The problem is the population surge and the lack of increase in GPs, nurses and midwives to cope with this huge surge. They then become burnt out and leave the NHS. So this creates a vicious cycle, and more stress is put upon the staff who are left. Now, the absolutely staggering response from everyday Brits wanting to host Ukrainian refugees is seemingly as headache-inducing as it is heartwarming. Firstly, the government's woefully slow reaction and typically bureaucratic approach has left many taking matters into their own hands by using social media, something that opens the door to traffickers as well as Good Samaritans. Then there are those who, equally predictably, want to turn it all into a racial issue by claiming other refugees haven't been accorded the same open-armed hospitality. Well, GB News previously brought you the story of one couple from Durham going to the Polish border to pick up 18 Ukrainian refugees. They had made space for them in their farmhouse and hoped the families would be settled into a new life here by now. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney has more.
Hopefully they'll enjoy relaxing in there.
They were excited, optimistic and determined to make a difference.
We do know the children's ages and names.
Paul Aitchison and Helene Kell prepared their farmhouse for 18 Ukrainian refugees. They packed up 200 bags of donations and made their way to the Polish border on March the 18th. The moment they met their sponsors was as emotional as they expected.
A really happy moment knowing that we'd met them and that they just were so appreciative of us being there.
The problem is that they're still there. Applications were filled out 10 days ago. Checks were carried out at the visa centre then. They were told processing would take 72 hours, but it's now been more than 3 times that.
One centre in particular will only put refugees up for 3 nights because their expectation is after that they move on. So without people from Britain and sponsors and the UK government support, they genuinely have got nowhere to go. And the damning story is certain individuals that I speak to in the visa centre say they are considering heading back to Ukraine and taking the chances there because this process is just not working.
The couple say conditions are so poor in these available centres that 2 of their sponsor children have been hospitalised.
The sheer volume of people, they can't cope with them. So actually in Warsaw Central Station, they've got a notification up saying, look, we recommend you proceed through Warsaw into surrounding areas because Warsaw's full. And I think that's why we're still seeing a lot of people sleeping on the streets.
Where our actual family is, we've had to move them from the PTAC centre because 2 of them ended up in hospital on drips.
Paul and Helene also reached out to their local MP. They've been told their case is being worked on, but say the lack of government support is unforgivable.
Government have reached out to the British people to say, look, we need you to be part of this process. Phase 1, you need to go out there and find a connection. And we are doing that. We've been filling in applications, we've been matching people, we've been getting them sponsors, we've been liaising with people in the UK, we've got translators from the UK who are chipping in, we've got people raising funds, sending it over so that we can keep this process going. And the government are just doing absolutely nothing to help.
The Refugees Minister, Lord Harrington, said, "We are starting to see progress because of changes the Home Office made to streamline the visa process and put additional resources into the system. However, we need to do more and will be making further improvements to bring people to the UK as quickly as possible." A house waits for these refugees. When they will finally be able to call it home remains in the hands of the British government. Rachel Sweeney, GB News.
Well, still in the studio, of course, is James Bloodworth. James, how do you think the UK responds to various refugee crises?
I think the UK response in terms of supplying military aid to Ukraine has been brilliant. I think the promises we've made in terms of accepting refugees here have been good, but I think it's really important that we actually follow through them and it doesn't get stuck in kind of a bureaucratic mess and just you have the solidarity of the people in this country who want to have host refugees. But I hope the government gets on board and allows and facilitates that so they can do that.
And those people are saying that there's a marked difference between perhaps how welcoming we are to Ukrainian refugees compared to those from the Middle East.
I think we should have more sympathy for refugees from the Middle East, but I think this is on our doorstep. There's a clear right and wrong Putin against Ukraine, and it's in Europe. It feels like very culturally similar. It's more concerning for most people that this is going on in Europe.
James, it's been utterly fantastic having you on the show today, giving us your brilliant insights into a whole range of topics.
Thank you.
Do come back again. That's all I've got time for today. But of course, you can join me again tomorrow, same place, same time for We Need to Talk About here on GB News. Coming up next, it's The Briefing with the wonderful Darren McCaffrey. But first, let's have a little peek at the weather forecast. Have a fantastic evening. Bye-bye.
Hello. Winter has most definitely returned. A cold feel out there today. Plenty of sunshine around, but some wintry showers will also continue. High pressure is moving in, bringing, as I say, plenty of sunshine. This weather front brought some wet weather overnight and a covering of snow in places. But around the high, the winds are coming down from the north, hence the cold feel, but also feeding in the moisture from the North Sea, bringing in showers down the eastern side, which will continue to have that wintry mix. Hail, sleet and some snow on the hills. A really strong, bitter wind across East Anglia and the southeast. And a few more flurries likely over the high ground across parts of Kent in particular. It does feel cold despite the sunshine further west. Temperatures only in single figures. Add on that wind and it feels much closer to freezing. As the showers keep coming in from the North Sea through the evening and overnight, it could well turn icy as temperatures tumble across northern and eastern Scotland, northeast England and southeast England too, with a continued threat of further snow over parts of Kent in particular, mostly over the hills. But as I said, it could be slippery almost anywhere we see the showers coming in. Those showers will continue to be a mixture of sleet, snow and hail. A widespread frost, certainly in the west where we'll have largely clear skies. A dry, fine start to Friday for many. Plenty of sunshine, which will melt away any frost, but still one or two showers for Pembrokeshire and Cornwall, and certainly still more to come across parts of eastern England. And again, still that wintry mix, hail showers, some sleet and snow. And then we'll see some wet weather coming south across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, again with snow on the hills and mountains across western Scotland. Again, a cold feel on Friday with temperatures still in single figures and well below average for most. Temperatures falling away on Friday night, so again it could turn quite slippery out there, particularly where we've got this wet weather working southwards with some snow likely mixed into that over the hills across the southwest on Saturday morning. High pressure moving in there, so a lot of dry but cold weather this weekend.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and